Hello. So I've been thinking a little bit about contentment and how it relates to our practice. So I looked up some definitions of contentment. One common wording seemed to be a state of satisfaction and happiness. And another definition was freedom from worry and restlessness, which seems to fit also. And then there was somebody who just described it in a sentence of what I have now is good enough, which reminds me of what Venerable says that Lama Yeshe said so much. So the opposite of contentment is, I think, covetousness is kind of opposite of contentment in some way, and of course, just um, discontentment is. I think our discontentment plays a big role in our attachment, especially our attachment to getting new things, and we're, when we're not content, we want something new to fill some kind of void, you know. And this can take the form of maybe wanting a new computer, which might be reasonable if your old computer is very slow, ancient, and has other difficulties that make it hard to get your work done. But it can also take the form of just the mind wanting to chase after something, looking, um, trying to, thinking we're going to find something that's going to bring us happiness in this moment. You know, browsing the food shelves or trying to find something that catches your attention when you're not even really hungry, or surfing the net thinking, oh, something's going to come up on my screen that's going to just bring me joy, or daydreaming about people, places, things, events that we're attached to, or chasing after these things, and so on. You know? There's just this whole mind of this lack of contentment. And this is it's a form of misery, this lack of contentment. I think we all experience it to some degree. Um, it's something that we don't always recognize, though. We don't always recognize that it's suffering, that that our mind's just looking for something. It's like it's this restlessness looking to find an object so it can become grasping. And it's an unsatiable craving that can be with us constantly, though. And its contentment is not based on anything external. It's something it's a mental state, it's an attitude. And we can't get rid of our discontentment simply by acquiring the object of our attachment. We have to consciously try and cultivate contentment within ourselves. There's a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama that I find helpful. He says, when we indulge our desires, they tend to increase in intensity and multiply in number. We become more demanding and less content, finding it more difficult to satisfy our needs. And I think that's true in a lot of ways. We think that some external thing is going to bring us happiness, and we can keep indulging it, and it's not. Another quote that I try to keep in mind that I read years ago, I think in a Zen teacher's book or something, I don't remember where, is there's much contentment for those that are easily content. And I like that a lot. It sums up a lot. It also seems to imply that there's not much contentment, or maybe no contentment, for those that don't know how to cultivate it, no matter how much you get of what you think you want. So how do we cultivate contentment? I think our first step is to recognize our discontentment and our worry and our restlessness, to see it, and to recognize the disadvantages of that kind of mental state, the unhappiness of it, you know. And we also need to recognize that samsara is ultimately unsatisfactory, and try to stop trying to polish up our samsaric situation. I've heard that described as a prisoner sprucing up their cell rather than trying to get out of it. And there's a Zen story of a master who gives his disciple a piece of terracotta roofing tile and tells him to polish it. And it was simply not, it was too coarse of a material to polish. And the student spent a while trying to polish it before he came to the conclusion that this wasn't going to polish up, He thought, oh, I'll be diligent and that wasn't the right approach. And so when we can see and accept that samsara is by nature unsatisfactory, maybe then we can work with trying to be content with what we have, rather than trying to, against all odds, get our ducks in a row or get our external conditions to cooperate. We can learn to just say, good enough. And sometimes when I'm meditating and the mind is restless, I'll bring myself back to my breath and I'll say, you're right where you need to be right now. You're doing exactly what you need to be doing. There's nothing you need to be doing right now but meditating. Just, stop letting the mind wander off worrying about this and that I think I need to do or something. And with this, I'm basically trying to develop a sense of contentment to be where I'm at and doing what I'm doing. And this can be applied to many things, It could be cooking or whatever kind of work, or eating, walking, sleeping even, It's 10 o'clock. It's time to go to sleep. You can work on that again tomorrow and just be content with what you got done today, And so one thing I came across when I was looking for definitions of contentment was this little presentation in the form of a conversation where one person is talking about being content, and the other person says, the enemy of great is good enough. And the other person says, yeah, that maybe, but good enough is the best friend of happiness. So that's what discontentment brings us a lot of suffering. We're not happy, and we think that happiness is going to come from outside. But we can just learn to relax and say, this is good enough. I'm content to be here now. And sometimes we're not content with our practice. We think we should be well advanced by now. I've been practicing a few years. Why am I not a Buddha yet? And that's a bit of an exaggeration, but really, we're often not content with our practice and where we're at. And I'm not trying to encourage complacency or laziness, just a gentle sense of acceptance of where we're at so we can go from there. And Venerable has often said, be content to create the causes. And there's just a lot of wisdom in that little statement. Be content to create the causes. And awakening, like everything else, has causes and conditions. And if we create the causes and conditions, those causes and conditions, then we will progress to Buddhahood and become awakened. And if we don't create those causes and conditions, then we won't. And it takes a lot of effort and time to accomplish our goals, both mundane and the ultimate goal of spiritual goals. So having faith that putting the Buddha's teachings into practice will lead us to awakening. Let's develop a sense of satisfaction and happiness to be doing so, to be creating the causes for Buddhahood. Just taking the time to develop the traits inside that we want, to cultivate good qualities. And sometimes it may seem like we're not making progress very quickly, but just be patient and be joyful, rejoice in our good qualities and what we do accomplish.